Hello, everybody. Some missives lend themselves to the written word, and you've seen that over the last couple of weeks from me. This one, though, needs to come verbally because there's a lot to unpack here. So we're going to get to what the Fed has done and which side it has chosen, but first I've got to set it up so you understand how this works. So when the Treasury issues debt, how does it work? It actually isn't very complicated. It works kind of like an auction house. And it's not somebody going, hey, do I hear 100? But it's very similar. We brought this week $125 billion of debt to the marketplace. And there are bidders out there, and they're not raising paddles, but kind of like that. And they bid on the bonds. Well, okay, if you don't have as many bidders, you got to push that interest rate up to attract people to buy. If you have a whole bunch of bidders, you might be able to drop the interest rate so you can sell them and not have to pay as much interest. But it really is that simple. So, given that, about 10 days ago, the Federal Reserve had their big meeting. And the question was, would they raise rates? Would they try to lower rates? And here was the dilemma. If you raise the rates, you're going to slam us into a recession. Everybody knows what's going on with real estate right now. Make rates higher? You got to be kidding me. Do you really want to do that just before an election? But here was the opposite. What if they lowered rates? Well, that was going to fire off inflation. And do you really want to have a whole bunch of inflation heading toward the election? So what did the Fed decide to do? Well, the headline said, Fed does nothing. They neither raise nor lower, and then they jawboned it a little bit. But here's what the Fed did do. The Fed did something where they chose their path, and they chose inflation. So let's go back to our auction. The Federal Reserve is not allowed to show up at the auctions. It's illegal, and it makes perfect sense. The Fed can print as much money as it wants. If the Fed could show up at every auction, they could buy, theoretically, every single government bond at every single auction and basically own all the government's debt. Thus, it's illegal. But now I'm going to take you back to yesteryear. Let's go back to COVID. Here's what happened. We shut the economy down and the government began printing money. Well, the government began issuing debt like crazy. So someone had to buy that debt. Well, the Fed quickly realized, oh my gosh, they're going to flood trillions of dollars of debt out onto the market. And those bidders out there are going to go, if you want us to take risk on this, we want more interest. And the Fed didn't want that. But the Fed couldn't buy the debt. So what did they do? They went to what we call the primary dealers mostly, the big banks, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Citi, those guys. And said, look, fellas, we want you to show up at the auction. Buy everything. Just buy it. As soon as you buy it, we'll buy it back from you. Because the Fed isn't allowed to buy new issue debt, but they can buy old debt, old 10 minutes. So this is exactly what the banks did. The banks went to every auction, they bought it, that kept interest rates down, great. And then the Fed took all this debt onto their balance sheet, where the Fed ended up owning, get this, $9 trillion of the US government's debt. Well, everyone did wink, wink, nod, nod. Yeah, we see what's going on here. When I explain this to clients, they go, Greg, that's money laundering. Well, the NSA is probably listening to this. No, it is not money laundering. Anyway, so the Fed, realizing they had a PR problem, said, but look, we understood we did this. It was this COVID time. We are going to do quantitative tightening, translation. We're going to sell these bonds back out into the market once things normalize. All right, so COVID is way in the rearview mirror now. And the government promised, once we get COVID under control, we will bring spending back down to pre-COVID levels. Did they do that? No. COVID's 3 years ago. We're spending more now than we did during the crisis and issuing more debt than ever. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve was trying to be good to its word. All right, we're going to sell our bonds back into the market where it belongs, get it off our balance sheet. Well, this was just adding more supply, And at the auction, people are saying, I want a higher interest rate because you guys are choking us on this debt. So what did the Fed do 10 days ago? No, they didn't lower rates. No, they didn't raise rates. But they went to the Treasury and said, hey, look, we've been peeling off about $60 billion a month. We're going to help you out. We're not going to do $60 billion. We'll drop it down to $25 billion. You think, well, does that make sense? Interest rates lower than they normally could, which is inflation. So the Federal Reserve has chosen its path. It could have chosen recession or inflation. Now, they might end up with both stagflation, but they have chosen inflation. They are willing to inflation.